Well, hi, folks. Stu Bamick here from Consequential Christianity. And by the way, many of you have asked how do we get our weekly e-newsletter that we send out, letting you know about videos that have been posted and various things that we're doing. Just shoot an email to info@consequentialchristianity, info@consequentialchristianity, or sign up on our website. Go to the button where you can sign up your email name, and we'll be sure that you get on our list and know what's coming and what's taking place as we produce videos and teaching opportunities throughout the weeks and the months ahead. And now let's move into our Christmas message. I'm really excited about this series. I thank so many of you who have responded to me personally or online. I love this time of year, so let's go with our Christmas series. Well, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago that I saw my first Hallmark movie. You know the story. The girl has a boyfriend. She ends up in some small town, Evergreen, or somewhere that's celebrating Christmas. And she runs into a guy in town. He's a carpenter, or he runs a store, a small business. He lives there. He loves the town. There's fake snow all around. And you know the story. Gradually, slowly, they fall in love. Now it took me a while to realize that these were not real people and these were not real places. It was a made-for-TV event. They don't get married and live happily ever after. It's a fantasy. It's a fairy tale. It's make-believe. Which is why Luke, when it comes to writing the Christmas story, takes such great care to give us a detailed account of the events surrounding the Christmas message. He wants to assure his readers that with all of the magic and the wonder of the Christmas season, that the Christmas message of the Bible is not just a good story or a fairy tale. It's not an event that was made up. It is history. It is something that took place with real people in real time and in real places. And it's that event that we're going to take a look at in this message. Remember, Luke is a doctor, he is a physician, he is a scientist. He wants to get at the core of what really happened in the story of Jesus Christ. So he goes around and interviews every eyewitness that he can find about the story of this man Jesus. And he records it for us. And he begins in Luke chapter 2, verse 1 with the Christmas story. And he writes these words: "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town." In those days. Which days are Luke referring to here? Well, for 500 years, Rome had been involved in a bitter, brutal civil war. There was no peace in the land. And then on the Ides of March in 44 BC, a man by the name of Julius Caesar, the ruler of the empire, was assassinated by a man by the name of Brutus. Ultimately, there was a power struggle, and a man by the name of Octavian overthrew Brutus and emerged as leader of the Roman Empire. When the dust settled, this man Octavian took the title Caesar, Lord, Emperor, worthy of praise and honor and worship. He changed his name from Octavian to Augustus, the august one, the strong one. He consolidated the nation, he strengthened the military, he centralized the government, initiated these extraordinary building programs. He said, "I found Rome in brick, and I turned it into marble." And so this 44-year reign of Augustus is called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. It is the golden age of Rome. It is the first time in history that the whole known world, that is the Mediterranean world extending out to Syria, was united under one person, one government, one law, one language, one currency. It was an unprecedented time of unification. It was the fullness of time. Then Augustus does something so extraordinary that it's the first time that it ever happened in the history of the world. He realizes that to fund his ambitious programs and to pay for the massive military to keep the world centralized and organized under his rule, he would have to inaugurate a worldwide registration, a census, for the purpose of taxation. Nothing like it had ever happened before, and nothing like it has ever happened since. Now, the plan is amazingly simple. He would require every person to return to their place or home of family origin, to be registered. And it was this decree that brought the whole world into a centralized system under the Roman government and the rule of Augustus. Which is why Paul calls this decree the very epicenter of human history, the very moment that defined all of time. Paul writes these words about the significance of this moment in time and in history in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. He writes, "When the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law so that we might receive adoption as sons." Now, I want to focus in on that word fullness of time for just a moment. Paul had three choices for Greek words for time. He could have used the word chronos. We get our word chronometer from that. The moment-by-moment passage of time, the ticking of a clock. If you're a football fan, you know that there's a kickoff, and then from that moment on, we measure the seconds, all the way down to that last second field goal. That's chronos. It's the moment-by-moment passage of time. But he didn't use the word chronos. He could have used the word kairos. Kairos is not the mere passage of time. It's a single event in time that is so significant that we mark time with it. Columbus discovering America, Gutenberg inventing the printing press, the American Revolution. It's what we call history. But he didn't use the word kairos either. He chose a very unique word, the word pleroma, the fullness of time. That moment in time which defines all of time and all of history. And to Paul, there is only one pleroma. It is when God sent his unique only Son, Jesus Christ, to this world under the decree of Caesar Augustus. And that's why to this day we still date our calendar from the birth of Jesus. We mark it as AD and BC. Now, AD doesn't mean after the death of Jesus. It means in the Latin, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. When we say AD, we're saying 44 AD, 44 after the year of our Lord. To this day, we still mark our calendars by the birth of this baby. It is a moment that defines all of human history. It is the fullness of time. Luke continues with his recording of the events of this Christmas story, of the story of Jesus in real time, in a real place, with real people. He writes in verse 4, "And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David." This story gets even better. As it turns out, one of the people of this new enrollment is a simple peasant from a sleepy cattle town in Galilee by the name of Nazareth. His name is Joseph. He had a young bride-to-be. Her name was Mary. She was 14 years old and scared. She was pregnant and about to have a baby. She took that rugged, bone-jarring 80-mile journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem during the last days of her pregnancy. So imagine this. Imagine this. From his headquarters in Rome, Caesar Augustus had no idea that God was using him to bring about the fullness of time in a cattle shelter in Bethlehem. God was guiding and directing and shaping and governing all of human history through Caesar Augustus. You see, God wanted to make clear that the birth of his son would be a permanent reminder of the depth and the care and the love that God has for you and me this very moment. I mean, when we look at the place of his birth, it was not some quaint wooden creche, a nativity scene of Christmas cards, but it was cold, it was dark, it was damp, It was crowded. It's a lousy place for a baby to be born. It's God's way of saying, I've come into time and into history and in your life and in my life to live in your world. And I know, God says, that sometimes it's crowded, it's dirty, it's smelling, it's confusing. From day one, God determined not to shelter his son from the harsh realities of life. That's why he wasn't born in Rome or in a palace, but in Bethlehem in Judea. Some of my fondest memories are of Christmas Eve. As parents, it seems like we'll go to outrageous lengths to do anything we possibly can to see our kids' faces light up on Christmas morning. It's a magical time of the year. It's filled with the wonder of the season. And some of my great memories or fondest memories are of coming home on Christmas Eve. After church, I would be doing the Christmas Eve services and get home late. The kids would already be in bed, but they would leave plates on the fireplace with cups filled with milk and Christmas cookies and notes from each of the kids. And I would read those notes, and they were detailed notes. We'd get them to really write some detailed notes to Santa. And then in the dark of the night, it's usually around 11 or 12 o'clock at night, with some Christmas music playing, in the quiet of that time, I would write out answers to those letters. I would write them back in detail, telling them what I liked about them and why they were special and why they were unique and why they were important. And I would sign it Santa. And I couldn't wait for them. And I'd eat a couple pieces of the cookies and drink some of the milk. And I couldn't wait for them to wake up on Christmas morning and read the letters back from Santa that were really in detail about how God felt or about how Santa felt about them. And the reason behind that is because I don't want my kids to waste 1 ounce of emotional energy wondering if they're loved, if they're valued, if they're cared for, if they're important, if they're appreciated, if they're understood. And God's love for us is like that. He wants us to know how much we matter to him and how much he cares about us. This very moment, God is preoccupied with your life and my life. This very moment of all of the universe, God stops and he looks at you and me. Says, I get it. I know. I understand. I get where you're at right now. For some, it's a very difficult place or a hard place. Others, this Christmas couldn't be better. But God knows. He doesn't want us to waste 1 ounce of emotional energy wondering if he cares for you and for me. I know that some of you are going through some difficult times this Christmas. And you wonder, why me? Christmas, when I see what all people have, the great families, and look at pictures on Instagram and Facebook of all the wonderful things that are taking place, that's not my experience. That's not my life. Sometimes we get desperate. Life gets us on the run. It gets smelly. It gets messy. It gets dirty. It gets crowded. I want to reassure you that it's in the middle of those kinds of feelings of why me, that the Christmas message lights up the night sky. It is God entering time and history and saying, whatever drives us within an inch of our breaking point, whenever we say, I can't make it one more day, whenever we feel so lost and so alone and so empty, God says, I am entering your world to convince you once and for all that you are not alone, that I want you to understand that I am here, I am alive, I am active, I care, and I am in control of all of history. And if I can be in control of all of history, as I was at the moment of the very birth of my only son, Jesus Christ, working through Caesar Augustus and the Roman Empire to unite the world and bring about the fullness of time, if I could orchestrate all of that and be a part of all of that, I can also have the power to be a part of your life this very moment. I'm that kind of God. I can do that for you. One of my earliest memories of Christmas Eve was when I was just a little boy. My father was driving me up the hill to our church, St. Paul's Church, for a practice on Christmas Eve, early practice before the service of a little Christmas story that we children were going to present before the congregation later that evening. And I remember driving up the hill and looking out the window, and all of the stars were in their glory. It was a crystal clear night, and there was one star that really captured my attention. And I remember saying to my dad, I said, hey, Dad, is that the star? Is that the star that the wise men followed? And he said, yeah, could be. Could be. And I remember that evening then in church, we were singing Silent Night, and we lit our Christmas candles. And I remember that I knew that there was something different about that night. It was a silent night. It was a holy night. I later have come to understand that it was the night in which heaven had come to touch earth. And God was inviting me to be a part of the miracle of the incarnation. The incarnation, the personification of a holy God. God come to be known and seen and heard and touched. And I remember the wonder of that night. And I pray every Christmas as we light candles or we gather with our family and friends that we can all experience and enjoy and touch that moment in our lives. So God has come to be seen and known and heard and touched for your life and my life. And I want to go back now to what Paul originally wrote in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, when he wrote, when the fullness of time, that is the unification of the whole known world under Caesar Augustus, had come, God did something. Not only does God love us, but he shows that he loves us. For God so loved the world that he did something. He gave something. He sent forth, Paul writes, his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to do something. And what was it that child was to do? To redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. The fullness of time. It's the fullness of time for a reason. Not just a wonderful visit from a loving God, but God sent forth his only unique son to redeem the world, to redeem us from the weight of broken relationships and fallenness and disobedience, from a world of sinfulness. The birth of Jesus begins the central teaching and central point of all of the history of salvation. From Genesis to Revelation, all points to the coming of this Son. And then Paul says that he came to redeem us, and not only to redeem us, but he came to adopt us into the very family circle of God as children of God. I have a friend who's adopted, and he tells of how grateful he is, not only that he has been adopted in this world by two parents that came and found him and took them into their home and raised him and adopted him as their very own child and provided many opportunities for him. He says, yes, I was adopted once, but then in my later teenage years, I found out how much God loved me, and I realized that God has adopted me as a child as well. So I have been adopted twofold in my life. This adoption is a wonderful concept where we come into someone's home and are treated as if we are their child. Now, this is the wonder of Christmas. It is God's attempt to tell any and all who will listen that no matter who you are or where you find yourself or what the status of your life, God chose you. He wants to be near to us and close to us this very moment. It is that holy moment. And maybe this Christmas, you and I can open our hearts to God and say, you mean all of this was done for me? All of this for me? If I were the only person who had ever lived, all of this is for me? Yeah, for me. God sent forth his Son in the fullness of human history, in human time, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, for you and for me. All of this so that we could know the wonder of his love. And I'm praying that this Christmas season for you will be that special season. A holy time. A time when you can sense more deeply than ever before of how much you matter to God. how close God wants to be to you. And that you and I will carve out special, unique times where we can spend with God this Christmas season. With all the flurry and the busyness of the season, God tends to get lost. And I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to challenge me to carve out special time every single day just to be in the presence of this one who sent his Son to be with us this Christmas in the fullness of time.